parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, it's great to have all of you back for the course in Values and Spirituality. Today we will be looking at the implication of education in values. I'm here in the studio with Sister Denise. Thank you so much for joining us. The one question that popped into my mind as I read this is that if you look at the way individuals are educated, we go to school, and having completed school, some choose to engage in a tertiary education and acquire an educational qualification with the aim of finding themselves a profession. But education, as far as scholastic education is concerned, ends once you acquire the highest degree that you want to. Okay? Does spiritual education also have an end to it?
Actually, I would say that it's lifelong continuing education, because throughout your life you're dealing with human problems, the vagaries of the human spirit. You have to deal with challenges on a daily basis. As you grow, as you get older, new things come up that you have to deal with, and if you just remain educated to the level of a 25-year-old, where is the maturity? Where is the depth? So I think that people who continue to read and continue to assess themselves, continue to work through their relationships and so on, they really develop that wisdom that we associate with age. You see, if you just grow old, you don't get wise. You get wise by really thinking about all the things that happen on the track of your life pilgrimage.
Yes, I don't think many know that spirituality is a lifelong thing. So that means you're always a student.
You're a perpetual student in the University of Life.
Internal empowerment, you go on to say, removes the neediness that fuels consumerism. This surprised me.
Internal weakness means that the spirit, whose fundamental characteristics, or the force that makes up your spirit, is a force of love, peace, power, knowledge, inner capacity, purity. When you're running low on this, and when you have a history of not bothering about performing pure karma, and you clock up a lot of negative karma, it drains your energy, and, quite a bad thing, it compromises your intelligence. So that means your ability to think clearly and deeply is eroded, and you become a bit rigid, a bit arrogant. When you're getting empty like this, you feel that emptiness, and it reflects in greed, attachment, arrogance, wanting to acquire things that will make you feel full, which of course they don't. You feel good for a very short time, then you go back to that emptiness, but it fuels consumerism because of the emptiness of spirit.
I don't think many people create the link between the two. I really enjoyed this last line. An honest person is the same internally and externally. That is the most beautiful definition I've heard of honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen it that way before. Tell us what you mean.
If you want to know whether somebody's telling the truth, you ask them to repeat it with gaps in between. And if the story remains the same, it's likely to be true. If you make them repeat it under pressure, the story remains the same. It's likely to be true. People who want to give an impression, who want to seem to be something that they aren't, there's always going to be such a discrepancy between what's going on inside and what's going on outside. And a person will claim, I am this, 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 and then you see their action and you see that it's the opposite, you see.
Without self-deception, there are no double standards, no conflict in the mind, and you are loved by others. I must say, you certainly do know how to sell virtues. This sounds so attractive, and it's a state that everyone wants to be in, and to be loved by others is something that most people want.
People really want to be loved, but when I'm talking about virtues, I never talk about them separately from the acquisition of spiritual power. Conventional morality does, because they don't really like people to be powerful, partly because if somebody is powerful as well as virtuous, they don't need any external moral authority to tell them what to do and how to be. And so they become redundant. That's why they don't like them. Nobody wants to be redundant.
Education in values at the individual level demonstrates the power of an individual to influence society through example. Before you go into the explanation of that, as I read this particular subsection, I got the impression that what you're sharing here is actually a mirror for the student, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. When you're thinking about these things, it's really asking you to check yourself against this, to what extent are you like this? The purpose of this is to reactivate a deadened conscience.
Yeah, it takes quite a lot to achieve that. Tell us what you meant by this line, the first line.
If you are a person who carries the reputation of being a person of integrity, word will get around. And if you are a person who carries the reputation of being corrupt, and that word will also get around. No one will tell you overtly, but in their body language they indicate to you and to each other who's trustworthy, who they like, who they have to respect, but it's only superficial. And this is because, you see, people hanker after something they can trust, or someone they can trust. There's so many deceptions and disappointments and disillusions in this world. It causes people to look for, now, who can we trust? Who can we follow? People like to follow. And there is, in many ways, a crisis of leadership, certainly a crisis of moral leadership. If you look at some of the recent elections that have been going on in different parts of the world, you will see that the election campaigns put people having to vote for which is the lesser of the two evils, rather than which is the greater of the two, virtuous and inspiring ones. Because the campaigns are all about, well, this person is bad in this way, and then the other one will say, well, that's okay, but because that one's bad in that way. And then the voter doesn't really know which is worse.
I found the next line to be very lovely. People tend to act in an honorable way when presented with an example of high standards. Really?
They do. The way you are in front of people kind of carries them. And as soon as you do something which they would disapprove of, or which is hypocritical, then immediately they will sort of move away, move back. People just really like to connect with and to identify with someone who seems to embody their hopes, but then they are afraid, okay, when is it going to break? Is this too good to be true, So they do start, if they really see somebody who's really good, who treats them really well, it wakens up all of their good characteristics. So there is quite an impact.
People copy what they see with little effort, whereas they shy away from spoken or written prescriptions. We usually say that this applies to children, but this applies to adults also?
Maturity happens very slowly, and some people are, 55 going on 15. So it's not really a matter of age. It's a matter of, how well you deal with the blows that life gives you, and how well you understand the realities of the wider social world. But I mean, in terms of what will you listen to, you won't listen to finger wagging, because it makes you feel bad inside. And people who have self-respect, they don't allow themselves to be talked down to.
You go on to say, educationalists and researchers in social development are now saying that change is successful when brought about at the micro level. Macro level attempts at bringing about social change through legislation and development programs have not been successful, so the focus is shifting to micro level or individual work. That's a lot of words. Firstly, define micro level change and macro level change, and tell us why there's been now a shift to micro level transformation.
Well, this is the sort of thing sociologists will look at to see what works. When you do things at the larger level, legislation and so on, you're not hands-on. Micro level is one-to-one. I remember Mother Teresa saying in response to some questions, how does she do her work? One person at a time. This is why I think that study about values and spirituality is done best in very small groups where you have opportunity to discuss like we're doing today, and where you can actually show the example over a long period of time of what does a person look like who operates on the basis of higher values, spiritually based values. What does it make another person feel like, and what impact does it have in their life when they're in the company of somebody like this? Now, some people will say, well, that takes too much time. What we're doing with this course is putting it out through the broadcast channels, which means that anyone who sees this can decide to embody it. And when I was teaching this in one of the universities in India, people started telling me that whatever they would learn in one lesson, they would apply it in their families, and they would see a very powerful and positive result just within their families.
That's beautiful.
That was very good feedback. This is what micro-level change is.
When you drafted this section of implications for the individual, what was your hopes and dreams for the sincere student as far as this course is concerned?
Well, my main aim is that a person empowers themselves, because when a person is performing negative karma, they're weakening themselves. Every time you do an action against your conscience loses functionality. So anyone who works with this and really learns critical thinking, much deeper analysis, moral reasoning and all of this, they are not doing what they're doing because somebody said so. They're doing what they're doing because they figured out that that's the best thing to do. And that carries a lot of power. And when a person is in their power like that, they influence others. So I'm really keen on developing individuals who have that ability to influence, which is a kind of leadership.
You mentioned moral reasoning and critical thinking before. I would like you to tell the viewer why this is such a crucial part of this course. What comes to mind is that this course is not just about this course. This course is about changing the way an individual thinks here,
Yes.
which is quite huge. Every other study one does is about taking what's on the page and internalizing it. whereas this is becoming a mirror, a very clear mirror, and changing the way one would think. That is literally shifting the tectonic plates of one's life, literally.
Yeah, very much.
So tell us why critical thinking is so much part and parcel of what you are imparting to the viewer.
I'll take you back to a line that is on the previous page.
Mm-hmm.
All women are fickle, dishonest, and adulterous. Therefore, it is wise to be suspicious of them and keep them confined. You see? So this is a statement that is a premise, followed by a conclusion in terms of logic. Now, this statement, all women are fickle, dishonest, and adulterous, well, there's no evidence to suggest that that is so. So if you make a statement like that to somebody who's a critical thinker, they will say, really? I can think of a few who are not. And then immediately they will say that that statement is false. Someone who's not a critical thinker will say, well, this statement was stated by an important, respect-worthy person, therefore it must be true, even if there's no evidence to support it that I can think of. You see, they won't bother to look for evidence. And then they'll immediately go for the therefore. And they want to be wise, so, be suspicious of all women and keep them confined, that makes me a wise man. Wow, how easy. A critical thinker will say, you know, this is a incorrect sentence that doesn't have any foundation, and so the conclusion is just as incorrect as the premise, you see. And so a critical thinker will say, well, we can't go with that because it's stupid. Because there's no evidence to show that it's true. It's just an empty claim.
As I'm listening to you, what comes to mind is that there are individuals who do not become critical thinkers because they think to become a critical thinker and question, even think of questioning what has been in existence for centuries, is to disrespect the forefathers, the ancestors, the writers of the books, the people who kept Indian culture going.
Well, this puts you in a dilemma. Either you respect truth or you respect people of the past. And you have to decide which is more important. If you say, well, to me, truth is more important than some very important person who said something that I don't accept as true, you see, then you will have to go for what you do accept, and then you will pay the price of public opinion saying, well, you're not respecting these people, and morality says you have to respect these people even if they're not true. And so you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. That's the expression that comes. And so this is why challenging these accepted things puts you, in a sense, makes you marginalized, because people will punish you for daring to suggest that the emperor doesn't have any clothes on, you know. And there is a story like that for a reason. And we're basically doing that, saying, excuse me, the emperor has no clothes on. Let's get down to realities here. What is real? What is true? Because there's been so many false premises that have been accepted for so long and nobody bothering to challenge it, that anybody who does challenge it is considered a threat who will bring down the whole building. And so people really prefer falsehood as long as it stands up. But it doesn't take much to take it down. It means the underpinning structure of your society has within itself the tendency to fall apart. And once these things reach a certain point of development over time, they're going to fall apart whether you push them down or not. And I think we can just look at the example of the Berlin Wall, which was put up at a certain point in time. It had its power, it divided Berlin into two, but then after a certain point in time, thinking changed, and one fine day everybody said, okay, we don't need this wall anymore, and they started pulling it down, and it came down overnight. Just as it went up overnight, it came down overnight because of a change in thinking which was broad enough to reach a tipping point. And I think it's quite an interesting example, because before that moment it couldn't have been pulled down, but when the moment came, anyone could pull it down because time was there. And I think that the days are numbered where people are willing to accept traditional attitudes that are clearly shown to be untrue over what is true. So there's a shift in people's mentality. They prefer what's true than what will hold up a system that they don't really go for anymore.
So it was a wonderful half an hour, Sister Denise. Thank you. Sister Denise has shared the importance of self-study, the importance of critical thinking and moral reasoning, two very powerful expressions. And I invite you to spend some time alone and consider what you know and look at it from a critical point of view, not to criticize the source, but to see whether it works for you where you are at this point in your life. So a very powerful lesson indeed. Many blessings.
Thank you.
And we do hope to see you again for the next episode. Take care and goodbye.